afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the 41st installment of the Stop COVID Deaths webinar series. And we are glad that you continue to join us in this learning journey as we continue to address your concerns about COVID-19. Last year, we talked about the implications for clinical management and vaccine development of the SARS-CoV-2 mutation from the perspective of genetic sequencing research. For today, we are following it up with another webinar, but with a focus on COVID-19 variants of concern in the Philippines. So with all the news about healthcare systems being overwhelmed in other countries due to the UK variant, the South African variant, the Brazil variant, everyone wants to know, handa na ba tayo? Are we ready? Good afternoon again. I'm Raymond Sarmiento from the UP Manila National Institutes of Health, National Telehealth Center. It's always a pleasure to be with all of you during our regular Friday lunch date. And with me, as always, is my mentor, my partner in crime, and our adjunct faculty at the National Telehealth Center, the Special Envoy for Global Health Initiatives, Dr. Susie Pineda Mercado. Dr. Susie?
Thank you very much, Raymond. Magandang araw po sa inyong lahat. Maupay na, basahin nga natin to. Maupay aga ugto, maayong buntag, marhay na aga, mayat ay agsaya. Tako amin, naimbag nga malen, kainanya amin. Hello everyone. Masaya naman you were doing your greetings in the dialects. Very nice to have everyone here with us today. We'd like to welcome also those who are watching on YouTube and on the Facebook streaming. As Raymond said, we've got a very interesting topic today and amazing speakers who are going to give you the latest information on the COVID-19 variants. But before we proceed, Raymond, I just wanted to make a little bit of an announcement. So we have, we'd like to invite you to another activity of the University of the Philippines. Let's put that up, TVUP. So the UP Alumni Association, UPAA, is hosting another Kapihan ng Bayan sa UP via Zoom on the 23rd of Feb. That's Tuesday. Next week at 10 o'clock a.m. Manila time on COVID-19 vaccines in the Philippines, their availability, comparative efficacies, and affordability. And the resource person is someone you know very well, Dr. Edsel Maurice T. Salvana, the Director for the Institute of Molecular Biology and Biotechnology, National Institutes of Health, University of the Philippines, Manila, and Adjunct Professor for Global Health, University of Pittsburgh. For those who are interested to register with the UPAA Secretariat, you can see it here, upalumniaso@gmail.com to get the Zoom meeting ID and their personal participants' passwords. This webinar is free. It's open to all UP alumni, faculty, students, the general public, and this is a special public service project of the UP Alumni Association. So more to learn, and hearing it from Dr. Edsel Salvana. So now back to our session for today. Everyone is worried. Well, I shouldn't say we're worried. We're hearing about the variants. And of course, we want to know about the variants of concern. So we talked about this before. There are variants, there are mutations, but not all of them should be a cause for us to worry. But there are variants of concern, some of the variants that we tend to watch because we need to know more about them. So we're going to talk about this in the webinar, and we're going to have a great conversation. You have the best speakers we could possibly get today. Raymond, over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Susie. So sa lahat po ng more than, I think, 1,200 na po na talagang nakatutok sa ating webinar.
1,600 na. Raymond, 1,600 na.
1,600. Okay. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Susie.
Yeah.
Who are online and those who will be joining us also in the Facebook accounts, in the YouTube channel. Maraming salamat po, and I hope you will enjoy this another very informative session today with our experts as the whole nation prepares for the vaccination rollout. So just to let everyone know of the structure of the webinar, in particular for those who are joining us for the very first time, There is a main discussant followed by reactions from our reactors, two of them for today. And then we will go on to a panel discussion, and hopefully there will be very, very interesting questions po from the Q&A section of this webinar. But before we proceed, let me acknowledge po, TVUP, I think you have a graphics card. All of the members of the very hardworking team of the Stop COVID Deaths webinar series, maraming salamat po, at wala po talagang humpay at wala pong kapaguran ang inyong dedikasyon at passion po for this webinar series. So thank you for all the teams that make this learning webinar series possible. Over to you, Dr. Susie.
Thank you very much, Raymond. So it's webinar number 41, and I just want to shout out to those who are watching from Sultan Kudarat, La Union, Bacolod, Batangas, Cavite, Baguio City. Again, from all over the country, we have our we have the audience. Those of you who are here to learn, as we are all here to learn, and we just want to also thank in advance all our speakers who found time to be with us today. So Raymond, you want to talk about the certificates?
Thank you, TVUP. Can you? Yeah, there we go. So here in front of us is an example of a certificate of attendance po na maibibigay sa ating mga attendees who at the very least spent at least 50% of the webinar duration for the entirety of it. And together with the certificate of attendance, mabibigyan din po kayo ng kopya ng mga presentations po of our resource person. So please take note, be very, very careful of what you input po dun sa ating registration page. Marami po kasi nagtatanong kung pwede pa po nila papalitan yung pangalan, but once we check it, it's really how you had inputted it. So be very careful because that is how it will be reflected in your certificate po. Maraming salamat, and over to Dr. Susie.
Okay, so I think, Raymond, I'm just looking at the numbers. Over the past few minutes, another 200, 300 people have joined us. Welcome to everyone. Welcome to the webinar. We are so happy to have you here. We're going to formally start our program now with a introduction from our Vice President, the UP Vice President for Academic Affairs, Dr. Cynthia Rose Bautista. VP Cynthia, welcome to the webinar.
Hi, good morning. Good morning, Susan. Thank you, Susan and Fran and Raymond, and good morning to everyone.
Okay, so before you give your introductory remarks as the VP for Academic Affairs, what does it look like from where you sit in terms of going back to face-to-face classes? How about all these students who are waiting to graduate? What does it look like? Do you think we're going to soon have face-to-face classes?
No, we are still actually delivering our courses remotely in the second semester, which begins in March. And basically, we're still waiting for clearance from CHED and from IATF for limited face-to-face activities, including the lab work of students who are doing their theses, as well as graduating students. So graduating students might have to postpone at the moment their graduation. But in the last quarter of 2020, we were hopeful that by the second half of 2021, we would already have at least we will begin our transition to the new normal in UP. And that new normal is not going back to the old way of teaching and learning, but it will be a mix of virtual, face-to-face, as well as experiential learning. So that was our hope. That's where universities are going, except that COVID actually speeded that up. But basically, with all of the news about the variants, and with the local news that the variants are here, the variants actually are spread more easily, infect more people, and in some news accounts, it's even more virulent. So basically, my speculation is that 2021 will be like 2020 for now, even if we have developed vaccines already. But having said that, I'm not sure whether the speculation has grounding. That's why I'm also excited to hear our speakers today.
Okay, thank you very much, VP. Please go ahead and give your introductory remarks.
Okay, so basically, in the midst of the loosening of restrictions for business, most of us are actually curious and anxious about COVID-19 variants that are now found in the Philippines. Are we ready for them? In 2011, the University of the Philippines Board of Regents, the highest policy-making body of the university, asked the faculty defending the proposal to establish the Philippine Genome Center the question, should a pandemic arise, are we prepared? That was in 2011. So the proponents argued then that they were proactively pushing for the creation of a domestic genome center precisely for a scenario in which the country's borders are closing, we are unable to send samples abroad for analysis, and the country has no capacity to identify these pathogens. So the proposal was approved by the Board of Regents, and PGC grew from very humble beginnings with support from the Department of Science and Technology. We are actually grateful that the pandemic struck slightly more than 10 years after the Philippine Genome Center was established and not earlier when it was still in its infancy. UPPGC is a UP System Research Center created to be at the forefront of high technical advanced research on the organisms around us at the molecular or genome level, using genomics and informatics as tools. Its mission includes building the capability and capacity of Filipinos to do genome sequencing and bioinformatics analysis, which are crucial for research and product development in the life science, particularly in the areas of health and agriculture. With tremendous and sustained support from the Department of Science and Technology for research and its core facilities, and with support from the CHED Philippine California Advanced Research Institutes, or PICARI, for its expansion and the acquisition of a state-of-the-art equipment, PGC has established a solid track record, which on hindsight must have been to prepare it for this pandemic. As the only center in the country with equipment and human resources capable of large-scale whole genome sequencing and bioinformatics analysis, it joined the government response together with the Department of Health's Research Institute for Tropical Medicine, or RITM, and Epidemiology Bureau, and the UP's National Institutes of Health in the national genomics surveillance of the viruses entering the country in our borders and ports of entry, as well as track the circulating viruses in the different regions. As of now, only UPPGC is involved in large-scale whole genome sequencing in the National Genomic Biosurveillance effort, as DOH RITM awaits procurement of its sequencing reagents. Its whole genome sequence data assigns lineage to the National Genomic Surveillance effort. PGC, in fact, was the first to flag the detection locally of the UK variant, data that is helping government formulate its response. Clinical researchers are also helped in their study of virus and viruses, and clinicians who treat patients are also aided by such analysis. UPPGC also exerted every effort to obtain a license to operate as a COVID-19 RT-PCR testing laboratory in April 2020, or early in the course of the pandemic, by converting the entire third floor of the PGC building into a lab with biosafety level 2 plus capability for COVID-19 testing. To date, the Clinical Genomics Laboratory of PGC has performed more than 52,000 RT-PCR tests, servicing the hospitals in Quezon City, Manila, Pasig, Calabarzon, that's i.e. Cainta, Binagonan, Antipolo, Morong, as well as the UP community. Together with the faculty, researchers, student volunteers from the UP Diliman's National Institute of Molecular Biology and Biotechnology and UP Manila's National Institutes of Health, UPPGC designed a hands-on training program and eventually an online training program with modules to expand the country's capacity to perform COVID-19 testing by RT-PCR. To date, more than 100 laboratories have received their licenses to operate as COVID-19 testing labs because of this effort. The project has been deployed nationally with the assistance of the newly established PGC satellite facilities in UP Visayas and UP Mindanao, which continue to host medical specialists and RTMTs to practice and get trained in RT-PCR training for COVID-19. For us in UP, this pandemic is a time for reckoning with the challenges of our mandate as research university on the one hand and as a public service university on the other. In the case of PGC, the pandemic brought together faculty and researchers from different disciplines across the UP system in its research mission. The expansion of PGC in Visayas and Mindanao and the work it is doing now are also helping substantiate our public service mission. Time and again, we have reminded our colleagues in the Philippine Genome Center that while the center was born and is maturing in UP, its mission from the time it was conceived is beyond UP. Thus, while UP sustains it, the university is effectively hosting PGC as a genome center of the Philippines. Its shared research facilities are meant to help scientists in and outside UP advance research that could eventually translate into innovations and technologies for the well-being of our people. Its capacity building programs are intended to contribute to an expanded pool of genomics researchers, while its immersion activities, even of high school students, yes, they do that, promise to attract them to disciplines that would open the field of genomics research for them in the future. But while this has been the vision of PGC since 2009 when it was first conceived, the COVID-19 pandemic highlighted the significance of having a genome center in the Philippines, having a Philippine Genome Center. More importantly, however, for this particular pandemic, our greater challenge is to ensure that PGC is ready to detect more variants of the COVID virus so that the Philippine government and the Filipino people can prevent its spread. So now back to the question in this webinar. Are we ready for the variants, the COVID-19 variants in the Philippines? So thank you.
Thank you very much. That was Vice President Cynthia. And thank you for mentioning the history of the Philippine Genome Center. And I think, Raymond, for this webinar, I think we should really be celebrating the work of these young scientists. In fact, if there are students who are listening here now, you know, work in genetics, that's the future for health, for medicine. And we are just so proud to have an entire team that's expanding, that's able to do all of this work on tracking the genetic sequencing of SARS-CoV-2. So thank you very much, VP Cynthia, for that excellent introduction. Later on, from TVUP, we're going to hear from some of these young scientists who are doing this work. Very fascinating work. In fact, if we didn't have them, if we didn't have this capacity, nasa na lang tayo, di ba? Umaasa na lang tayo na magpapadala tayo sa mga laboratorio sa ibang bansa. No. We should be proud as Filipinos that we have this capability and that there are people who are continue to push our efforts in science and technology in the field of health. So Raymond, over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Susie, and thank you also to the Vice President for Academic Affairs of the University of the Philippine System, VP Cynthia Bautista. But before we proceed, we always have this fun opinion poll. Wala po namang mali dito, so please do not be afraid in answering ang ating mga audience survey and opinion poll. I'll start off, and please key in po your answers as we start off with the first question. What place are you viewing the webinar from? So choices po, as always, NCR, Northern and Southern Luzon, Central Luzon, East Visayas, West Visayas, Central Visayas, Northern and Eastern Mindanao, Western and Central Mindanao, Southern Mindanao, and outside of the Philippines. So yes, for those who are joining us for the very first time, tayo po ay napapanood internationally. So wag po kayong matakot na mag-key ng inyong mga sagot at magtanong po sa ating Q&A box. For the second question, what is your line of work? So we have those coming in from the medicine sector, nursing sector, from pharmacy, midwifery, public health, education, some from policy, a few from legislation and media, and ang ating others. So very, very curious po talaga ako dito sa others na ito kung ano po yung 18% of our attendees who select others for their line of work. But before we proceed, let me take this opportunity po. Just as I mentioned, we are being viewed internationally. So let me just look at our registrants that we have. We are being viewed from Institute of Biomedical Sciences, from New Taipei City in Taiwan, from the Yonglulin School of Medicine in Singapore, the Hospital Labuan, Malaysia, from Semarang, Indonesia, Bangkok, Thailand, Ho Chi Minh, Vietnam, Kowloon City, Hong Kong, Doha, Qatar, Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, Abu Dhabi, United Arab Emirates, from the Al Sabah Maternity Hospital in Kuwait, Niagara Falls, Ontario, Canada, Winnipeg, also in Canada, London, England, from Northern Ireland, and also Tanta University, Egypt, from the British Indian Ocean Territory, at ito po medyo bago, Lyndon B. Johnson Tropical Medical Center, Pago Pago, American Samoa. So I think it's the very first time that I mentioned that place. So maraming salamat po sa patuloy na panonood, and as we carry on with our next three questions, the third question reads, a COVID variant of concern is option A, mutation affecting spike protein. Option B, more contagious / more infectious. Option C, more virulent and or causes more severe disease. Or option D, all of the above. So nearly 90% are choosing all of the above for this question. Question number 4, a COVID variant of concern could, option A, affect testing accuracy. Option B, affect effectiveness of vaccine. Option C, affect effectiveness of treatment. And option D, again, all of the above. More than 90%, mga 93% po ang pumili naman po ng all of the above. And for final question, a COVID variant of concern can be option A, detected through study of DNA. Option B, detected through symptoms of the patient. Option C, through epidemiologic studies on locality. And then 76% choosing all of the above. So for those who are in the webinar, numbering more than 2,040, so please key in your answers po as we move on to the main part of our webinar. Dr. Susie?
Thank you very much, Raymond. Just a reminder, last week we started opening cameras and mics of members of the audience who have a very good question. So put in your questions in the Q&A box. And if it's a good question, you'll have the chance to interact with our speakers today. So we're going to choose one or two. And we just want to encourage you to engage. And of course, we want to see your faces. We wish we could put all of you on, but this is all we can do for the moment. So participate tayo, sama kayo, lagay niyo mga questions dyan. All right, now, we are now going into the video that has been prepared by TVUP. And as I mentioned earlier, we wanted to highlight how proud we are of these young scientists of the Philippine Genome Center. And we also want to encourage those of you who are thinking about what should you be studying, what should you be doing. Well, look at your options at the Philippine Genome Center. Over to TVUP.
Itong Philippine Genome Center, hindi ko kabisado yung kanilang ginagawa, pero ang alam ko, nasa loob siya ng UP.
Hindi po ako familiar sa Philippine Genome Center. Ngayon ko lang siya narinig.
PGC, of course, stands for Philippine Genome Center. So we're the institution in the Philippines that handles the sequencing and analysis of genomes for genomics and biological research.
There's also a diagnostic arm where we get samples from the hospital and perform diagnostics.
Tumutulong ang PGC sa biosurveillance ngayon ng new COVID strain, the UK variant strain.
One of our major initiatives was testing one of the COVID test kits, the RT-PCR kits.
Sa PGC, hindi lang health yung fino-focus. So meron ding other aspects like agriculture, marine. So basta any sequencing matters or genomics.
Nakikipagtulungan ang PGC sa kasama ng DOH para matrace natin kung nasaan na ba yung UK variant strain tsaka yung mga presensya niya sa iba't ibang lugar dito sa Pilipinas.
We take samples of the virus from patients around the country, we sequence them, and then we analyze them to see how the virus is changing and evolving so that public policy can be based on the science.
Normal naman mag-mutate sa virus. So, nagiging alarming lang siya kasi For this UK variant, for example, nagkakaroon ng several mutations sa spike proteins, which yung spike proteins na yun yung nagiging, sabi nila is yung naging reason kung bakit mas nagiging transmissible yung virus o mas mabilis siyang kumalat.
In general, it may affect vaccine development if vaccines would be effective on certain variants.
Pandemic moving forward, sa tingin ko, mas matututo yung tao na mas maging cautious sila sa health nila, sa hygiene nila.
Since ngayon nga, habang nakikita natin na maraming variants, ibig sabihin, continuously nag-evolve din yung virus. So, kailangan maka-catch up tayo. Important din po na meron tayong science-based policies and decision-making po sa government natin.
Thank you very much, TVUP, for that. I really love these young scientists who are like detectives who are tracking the virus, trying to see what form is coming out here in the Philippines. And this is not the first time we're talking about variants. So the last time we talked about variants, we didn't have the UK variant in the Philippines, but now we do. And so we thought, okay, maybe it's time to talk about the variants again and to see what else is happening and how prepared we are. So Raymond, I'd like to introduce our main presenter for today to answer the question of, are we ready for the COVID variants of concern? Kasi sabi natin maraming variants, pero ang gusto natin pag-usapan yung COVID variants of concern. No? Mamaya sasagutin natin yung tanong, ano ba yun? So we'd like to welcome the very dynamic director of the National Institutes of Health, Dr. Eva Cutiongco Dela Paz. Eva, welcome back to the webinar. Ikaw ay isang haligi ng ating programa rito.
Magandang tanghali po, Dr. Susie, at magandang tanghali po sa lahat ng nandito sa ating TVUP webinar.
Okay, Eva, you know, we were talking about this right before we went on the air, no? That we have to be very accurate about what we say about these variants. And this is the reason why we have the webinar, because there's so much disinformation out there. People are already, what should I say, have a communication overload and information overload. So why is it important that you were just saying earlier that you had a very long 4-hour meeting on something, and why is it so important that we only give accurate information to the public?
Maraming salamat po sa tanong niyo, Ma'am Susie. Kakatapos lang po ng aming media presser, kasama po ang DOH Health Secretary, si Secretary Duque at si Yusek Vergere, at members po of the task force, the technical working group for variants na ni-reconstitute po ni President Duterte. Nag-present po kanina si Philippine Genome Center Executive Director Cynthia Saloma ng bagong findings po from yung mga na-sequence po sa Region 7. Kailangan, importante po ang ating tamang pagbibigay ng information sa public kasi po katulad nung mga nakita na po natin sa newspaper today, nakakita po ng 2 mutations of concern sa Region 7. Pero hindi pa po natin alam kung ano po talagang ibig sabihin nito. At kailangan po tayong gumawa pa ng maraming investigasyon para po magkaroon tayo ng substantial conclusion to be able to make the necessary measures to beat this problem that we have right now po.
Okay, thank you very much, Eva. I mean, so important, no? Sometimes we want our story to go ahead of the facts. So, importante talaga na na sigurado tayo bago nagbibitiw ng impormasyon kasi yun na nga, parang yung mga tao nagkakaroon na ng confusion because of it. So we're very happy that you're here, Eva. By the way, Eva is also the Program Director for Health of the Philippine Genome Center. So she's with the National Institutes of Health, but she also works for the Philippine Genome Center. So Eva, please go ahead with your presentation.
Maraming salamat po, Ma'am Susie. Magandang hapon po uli sa inyong lahat. Thank you po, Dr. Susie, for your kind introduction. There has never been a point in time when the world has been able to track genomic changes to a virus at the speed and scale as now. Genomic surveillance helps drive public health decisions in real time, just like what we are doing now in the country. It is closely integrated with existing diagnostic and epidemiologic public health programs and communicates usable and timely results for public health benefit. Everyone knows by now that it was genome sequencing that enabled the rapid identification of SARS-CoV-2. Knowing the genome sequence allowed fast development of diagnostic tests and other tools for response. Genomics and bioinformatics are the primary tools used for genomic surveillance during this pandemic. Whole genome sequencing is able to investigate outbreak dynamics in terms of changes in the size of the epidemic over time, spatio-temporal spread, as well as transmission routes. It is also able to assist in the design of diagnostic assays, drugs, and vaccines, as well as monitor changes in efficacy of treatment and vaccines over time, which may be attributable to changes in the virus genome. This is a snapshot of the steps in whole genome sequencing. From the swabs, the clinical samples, the samples are processed to prepare them for sequencing in this high throughput next generation sequencer. The NovaSeq allows us to sequence 750 samples a week at the Philippine Genome Center. And we try our best to get representation from the different regions in the country, but also with special focus on where we see surges in cases. The sequences are subjected to bioinformatics analysis and viral dominant genome sequences are generated. What are these genomic changes being tracked? Why is it important to track those changes? The overwhelming number of COVID cases worldwide is allowing the virus numerous opportunities to change a little bit. Each infected person is essentially a chance for SARS-CoV-2 to reinvent itself. Scientists believe that the virus is getting better at being a virus. Viruses constantly change through mutation due to evolution and adaptation processes. It has had minor random mutations ever since it jumped from animals to humans. Natural selection favors organisms that are better at survival and reproduction. Most emerging mutations will not have a significant impact on the spread of the virus, but some mutations or combinations of mutations may provide the virus with a selective advantage, such as increased transmissibility or the ability to evade the host immune response. These are the genes in the SARS-CoV-2 genome, which contain instructions to build parts of the virus. You have the ORF genes, the E, M, and N genes, and the S gene encircled here contains genetic instructions to build the spike protein, the part that allows the virus to attach to human cells during infection. This section of the genome serves as a key region for monitoring mutations. Although mutations can happen in any part of the SARS-CoV-2 genome. The SARS-CoV-2 being an RNA virus is not stable. Mutations can take the form of a single letter typo in the viral genetic code or deletions or insertions of longer stretches of RNA. This is a graphic representation of some of the mutations with red X marks associated with the B.1.7 variant or the UK variant. The SARS-CoV-2 genome has 29,903 nucleotide bases or letters and acquires around 2 single-letter mutations a month, a rate around half as fast as influenza and 1/4 the rate of HIV. Vital applications of virus genomics in informing public health responses have been built on what we call phylogenetic trees These are analysis to visualize mutational changes over time. Trees start with the earliest known version or common ancestor of a virus, and every branch in a tree equals one mutation away from that ancestor, the so-called new strain. From the genome sequences A, B, C, D, E here on your right, from various samples, mutations in the virus that have accumulated over time are characterized here as colored circles. The tree on the right is created based on the data, and the leftmost branch in the tree shown here represents a mutation colored blue, which is common to all sequences, and thus represents an older strain of the virus. Moving to the right, branches are added to depict new mutations and strains of the virus. Phylogenetic trees constructed from whole genome sequences investigate hypotheses of transmission routes, determine hypothetical source of exposure when phylogenetic clustering of sequences is observed, and establish epidemiological links. Since its spillover into the human population in late 2019, SARS-CoV-2 has diversified into many clades and variants represented here by different colors. The Global Initiative on Sharing All Influenza Data, or GSAID initiative, promotes the rapid sharing of data from coronavirus, including genetic sequences and related clinical and epidemiological data. Many thousands of variants of SARS-CoV-2 subtypes of the virus can be put into larger groupings such as lineages or clades. One can clearly see here the timeline emergence of the UK variant colored orange, the South Africa variant colored yellow over here, and the Brazil P.1 colored red. The GSAID dashboard also shows the countries where the sequences are coming from to help researchers understand how viruses evolve and spread during the pandemic. Because of our capability now to do sequencing at the Philippine Genome Center, sequences from the Philippines have been deposited and also from RITM previously. These sequences from the Philippines have been deposited, and we are not, you can see here, we are not a missing link anymore. What have we found so far in the country? There are 1,992 sequences already generated as part of the genomic surveillance efforts since the first week of January to the second week of February 2021. A total of 61 lineages have been identified locally. Most frequently observed lineages are the B.1.63 or the Hong Kong lineage, B.1.1 or the European lineage, and B.1.263 or the UAE lineage. In recent months, several new variants of the original virus have been detected that seemingly cause major changes in the way the pathogen acts, including alterations to its contagiousness. A variant is a group of coronaviruses that share the same inherited set of distinctive or signature mutations. These variants of concerns have seemingly appeared in rapid succession in different geographical regions such as the UK, South Africa, and Brazil, and in some cases have outcompeted the existing variants. This is the phylogenetic tree of SARS-CoV-2 in the Philippines. You saw all the young scientists from the Philippine Genome Center who were interviewed in the video. This is their big work for the country. The samples that have been sequenced at the Philippine Genome Center collected since mid-2020 also showed the D614G mutation in the spike glycoprotein of SARS-CoV-2, which was first detected at the significant level in early March 2020 and then spread globally to have a global dominance over the next few months. In this tree is also shown the B.1.17 or the UK variant already detected in the country. There are now 44 cases to date that have been detected in the country. And you can see here that we have a sample coming from the UK variant detected in the Bontoc cluster, from another one from a returning overseas Filipino from the Middle East, and a sample from Laguna. The B.1.7 was first identified in late December in the UK. It has spread to 80 countries at the moment. It has 23 recent mutations, including the N501Y, the P681H, the HV69 to 70 deletion, plus 4 more on the spike protein, and also stop mutation on the ORF gene. This is the genome of the SARS-CoV-2, and the mutations are spread out in the different genes, but many are in the spike protein. The variant is thought to have greater than 40% increased transmissibility. Increased virulence is suggested, but it remains to be resolved, but it remains unresolved. And there is little concern about current vaccine efficacy as far as this variant is concerned. This graph from Dr. John Wong of Epimetrics shows the possible impact of the B.1.7 variant on active cases. So this is the baseline reproduction number of 1.25 in the country, the variant with a reproductive number of 1.95, which is higher. And this graph shows us that if the variant becomes the dominant species after a month, cases will increase by 28 times instead of just 3 times, as you can see here. And from there, planning scenarios can be derived for variant control. According to Dr. Wong, if there will be a reduction in baseline cases by as much as 80% at the end of the month, the country can have just a little more cases compared to having no variant. He said that the most important message here is that while the variant still has not become dominant, efforts should be focused on reducing the baseline cases. The B.135.2 was first identified in late December in South Africa, and now also detected in Africa, Europe, Asia, and Australia. The B.135.1 variant appeared around the same time as B.1.17. It spread quickly in South Africa to become the dominant version in that country. It has 21 mutations, including the N501Y, the E484K, and the K417N on the spike protein, and mutation also in the ORF1B deletion, which is outside the spike protein, as you can see here as well. It is proposed to have heightened transmissibility, though there is no evidence of increased virulence. In vitro studies suggest a potential for immune escape following natural infections and a small effect on the potency of vaccine-induced antibodies. A new concern also is that it might be able to more efficiently reinfect people. For the Brazil variant, there are 2 versions, the P.1 and P.2. Both seem to have descended from an older common ancestor variant. Although they share mutations with other newly discovered versions, they appear to have arisen independently of those variants. The P.1 was discovered in travelers from Brazil during screening at a Japanese airport in January. This variant has been implicated in the surge of infections that struck Manaus in the Brazilian Amazon, leaving their healthcare system on the brink of collapse at that time. Its effect on transmissibility and or virulence is unknown. There are concerns that the variant may be able to overcome the immunity developed after infection by other variants. Let me just mention notable mutations. I've been giving letters and numbers a while ago, let me just mention notable mutations found in the different variants to better inform public health measures. The UK, South Africa, and Brazil harbor an unusual constellation of mutations, but they all share the N501Y mutation. This mutation affects the receptor binding domain of the spike protein. It replaces SARS-CoV-2's 501st amino acid, asparagine, with tyrosine. The mutation is near the tip of the spike protein, changing the shape of that spike protein to have a tighter fit with human cells. The observation that similar mutations have appeared in 3 different variants and the fact that they are spreading makes scientists suspect that they may have an evolutionary edge. In the E484K mutation, glutamine E was replaced by lysine K at amino acid position 484. It is called an escape mutation because it helps the virus slip past the body's immune defenses through a conformational change. B.1.7 variants carrying the E484K mutation their thinking may be more efficient at reinfection. An increased amount of serum antibody is needed also to prevent infection of cells. That is what the mutation appears to be doing. Clinical trials data by Novavax and Johnson & Johnson showed that their new vaccines were less effective when they did the trial in South Africa. The Philippine Genome Biosurveillance is closely monitoring variants of concern. Why is variant surveillance important? The US CDC outlines important potential consequences of emerging variants, such as ability to spread more quickly in people, ability to cause either milder or more severe disease in people, ability to evade detection by specific diagnostic tests. Because although many commercial RT-PCR test kits have multiple targets to detect the virus, such that even if a mutation impacts one of the targets, the other RT-PCR targets will still work. However, there are some RT-PCR tests that rely on only one target, and mutations may impact their ability to work. For decreased susceptibility to therapeutics that employ monoclonal antibodies, these treatments are more specific than antibodies that develop from natural immune response and therefore may be less effective against variants. And lastly, ability to evade natural or vaccine-induced immunity. I believe our esteemed reactors will talk more about this. A better understanding of variants of concern is needed. What are their differences in properties? How do the variants replicate? Do the variants escape neutralizing antibodies from people who have been previously been infected or from others who have been vaccinated? In coming months, we may need to retool these vaccines and administer updated versions, much in the same way that flu vaccines are revised each year. So we need to study, we need to do a lot of research regarding these concerns about the variants. We have learned an awfully hard lesson about the intrinsic vulnerability of our societies to a single pathogen. As part of a global health community, we need to be better prepared for future threats. In summary, a national genomic surveillance using whole genome sequencing can investigate outbreak dynamics and assist in the design of diagnostic assays, drugs, and vaccines. Whole genome sequencing is also used for monitoring changes in efficacy of treatment and vaccines over time. Mutations or combinations of mutations leading to new variants may provide the virus with a selective advantage, such as increased transmissibility or the ability to evade the host immune response. A better understanding of variants of concern is still needed. So we go back to the question posted in this webinar. Are we ready for these variants of concern? The most important message is if we are able to keep the number of cases down by being responsible and doing our part in practicing minimum public health standards, this will allow the virus, because if we don't do that, the virus will have an opportunity to change and get better at being a virus, and we don't want that to happen. The national government's PDITR strategies of prevent, detect, isolate, treat, and reintegrate are among the best measures to contain the transmission of variants of concern to minimize chances of further mutations from occurring. Maraming salamat po at magandang hapon po sa inyong lahat.
Thank you very much. That was Dr. Eva Cutiongco Dela Paz, the Director of the National Institutes of Health and Program Director for Health of the Philippine Genome Center. Brilliant presentation. I would encourage you to watch it again and encourage others to watch it on YouTube and on Facebook of TVUP, because the more we understand what is happening, the better we will be prepared to respond. And I think, you know, throughout this webinar series, we've been talking about treatment and how to take care of patients, but there is a huge part of the science that is about understanding the enemy, understanding how it's changing, what it's doing, and how we can be better prepared to respond. So thank you very much, Dr. Eva. We're going to hear more from you on the panel discussion. So we asked the question, you asked the question, Eva, about what's the impact on testing, what's the impact on treatment and management. So I'm turning over to Raymond to introduce our very special next speaker. Raymond.
Thank you, Dr. Susie, and thank you for that excellent presentation, Executive Director Eva Cutiongco Dela Paz. I'd like to introduce our next superstar resource person also. He's a microbiologist, infectious disease specialist, and is also the Deputy Executive Director for the Philippine Genome Center. But you probably know him better as the inventor po of the first Philippine-made testing kit for SARS-CoV-2, none other than Dr. Raul Destura. So Raul, magandang hapon po.
Magandang hapon, Raymond, and magandang hapon sa lahat ng nakikinig at nanonood dito sa ating webinar series.
Go ahead with your talk, sir. Thank you so much.
Okay, so it was a very comprehensive presentation of our Deputy Executive Director, of our Executive Director of the National Institutes of Health and Program Director of the Philippine Genome Center. And much has been said about the variants related to where it came from and how it's actually evolving. There are several areas for which I just need to highlight the importance of one, biosurveillance. In this particular presentation, we actually showed, the speaker actually showed the importance of the genomics in terms of monitoring the movement of viruses for epidemics, pandemics, or even the naturally occurring ones that we see today. It was also stated there that just like the influenza virus and the HIV viruses, although it only has less mutation changes compared to the influenza of about 2 nucleotide chains per month, it gives us the importance that genomic surveillance to be part and integrated into the biosurveillance program for viruses in the country. And having such capability now than ever before will put us in the forefront in contributing globally to the knowledge base on how these viruses transform and move around the world as we see them in real time. The second point I would like to put in there is the clinical implications of these variants. Studies have shown that overall, in terms of which of these variants are actually affecting clinical outcomes, has been showing that in in a bird's eye view presentations of these cases, the variant of concern versus the non-variant of concern in terms of clinical disease manifestation are not showing significant differences. But when they did prospective review of further analysis of these cases under what we call the 28-day mortality studies, between the variant of concerns versus the non-variant of concern, there is somewhat a possibility of an increase of about 1.6%, 1.6 odds of developing more severe disease, but this still needs to be further investigated as more data are coming in from day to day from the global community. There's also an issue related to the diagnostic test, whether it can pick up the virus or not in considering the variants. And I would like to agree with our presenter that for diagnostic tests that targets multiple genes, has a better advantage than those who are do single gene targets, PCR technology, that principally targets the spike protein. But the other gene targets are spared from significant mutations, but that doesn't mean that we should continue monitoring such changes, because for all you know, the mutations will spread beyond the spike proteins and could eventually affect the behavior of this diagnostic test in the future. But for now, for multiple gene targets diagnostic assay that targets other genes, it would still be able to pick up the variants we're being monitoring. The second thing that, the fourth thing that I would like to put in perspective is the importance of preventing further mutations. We cannot do something about the virus as they behave. It's part of their, what we call the survival gene, the survival of the fittest. If the virus needs to survive in the environment, it must be able to avoid some of the mechanisms that stops them from replicating. And what can we actually do to stop them from replicating? First is the most common, the most logical part is preventing the virus from going to another person, because the mutation occurs when the virus are actually replicating. So if we avoid further transmission of the virus, we are preventing further replication processes among these viruses, and should end with one person as the patient recover, which means that the minimum health standard plays a very crucial and significant role in reducing the ability of the virus to further transmit to another person, further reducing the replications of the viruses as a whole in the community, and further reducing its ability to mutate further as they, my worry there is to be significant again, that it will not just be in terms of its transmission potential, but also its virulence and ability to cause severe diseases in the future can actually be prevented.
Okay, I think we lost Dr. Destura for a moment there. Let's see if we can fix that technical. Okay, there. Go ahead. Raul, go ahead. Nawala ka for a few seconds.
Sorry, my signal is fluctuating here. So going back to what I was saying in terms of the prevention of the transmission and how do we prevent further mutations of this virus, the other thing that's very important to us is the importance of the herd immunity, either an intrinsic herd immunity because of exposures in the community, and much more ideal is the coverage in terms of the vaccines. Now, there are concerns related to will it be effective against the circulating variants. Overall, in terms of its percent efficacy, there may be some milder reductions in terms of in vitro analysis, but the percent efficacy is still high enough to have an effective herd immunity, because the antibodies produced by these vaccines are polyclonal in nature, meaning it targets several portions of the spike protein and not just on the ones that actually mutated. So in terms of reducing the transmission dynamics, if we get enough vaccination as fast as we can faster than the mutation rate of the virus, then it will ultimately reduces the transmission of the virus, its ability to replicate and its ability to mutate further. So it's really a huge and Herculean task now to be able to achieve that. Oh, the question here is how fast, how efficient, how short, and how many can we actually cover Filipinos receiving the vaccines in such a short period of time will actually further increase our advantage in reducing the transmission dynamics. But on a global perspective, the issue here is if it's, for example, one country is not as fast as the other, in a global scenario, there would still be that mutational advantage of the virus if we don't really get this global vaccine coverage. It's easier said than done, but there is this initiative from the World Health Organization, which is what we call the COVAX initiative, that allows us to hopefully be able to get vaccinated almost ideally, but easier said than done, in a simultaneous fashion all over the world. But as we see, some countries are receiving it now, others are not, and we're still waiting for our own. So there are a lot of nuances around that area, and we're hoping that we get to have access to this vaccine. The sooner, the better, so that the coverage will be faster, and to achieve a herd immunity to as high as 80% would allow us to control the transmission of the virus at bay. So moving forward, it's very important that there is an interdisciplinary collaborations, at the same time, efficient operations and interoperability in terms of how we do things now, in terms of getting as many people vaccinated in the future. But while waiting for that to happen, the second very powerful way of reducing its transmission dynamics is following the government's advice on minimum health standards. That is a very effective way of further reducing the transmission of the virus while waiting for our vaccines to arrive in the country. So with that said, I would like to end my reaction to thank the entire TVUP community and for the presentations presented by our executive director and for providing us a very good overview of what the variant is all about. Thank you and good afternoon, everybody.
Thank you very much. That's Dr. Raul Destura, more popularly known as the one who created the first testing kit in the Philippines. And we're very proud of the work that you're doing, Raul. I was just saying earlier, when we look at our COVID response, part of it is, of course, taking care of those who get sick. But on the other side, what you have done in terms of tracking down this virus and understanding how it is changing so that we can fight it is so important. So thank you very much for all that you're doing for our country. I'd like to move on to our next speaker. Raul, please join us later in the panel. No, I think there are a lot of things we need to talk about, and I think some of our members of the audience have questions for you. So please stay with us. Now, may I turn over to somebody who is also always with us on the webinar, and another, what should I say, very important person in our pandemic response. So we would like to welcome Dr. Jubert Benedicto, who is head of the Philippine General Hospital Critical Care Unit Management Action Team. And he will talk a little bit about the variant and treatment. So Raul talked about, can it affect testing? I think the question for Jubert is it affecting treatment? So Jubert, welcome to the webinar and nice to see you. Nice to have you with us again.
Good afternoon po, Ma'am Susie. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, Raymond. And thank you very much, Dr. Eva, for that comprehensive and concise review. Napakasimple po and then napakadaling intindihin. And Raul, thank you very much for your subsequent reaction. Well, first of all, what do the studies indicate in terms of clinical presentation as far as this variant is concerned? Quite consistently, they will tell you that these patients who harbor the variant have more persistent cough. One third of them will have persistent cough associated with tiredness, muscle aches, and sore throat plus fever. So quite consistently, mas persistent po yung mga symptoms na yun compared to those who has acquired the non-variant strains. Ano? But ang importante po dito, itong may variants, they don't report loss of taste and smell. So quite consistently, yung pong dati nating mga patients, nagsasabing bothered sila dahil may loss of taste and smell. Itong new variants is somehow giving us that signal na wala po siyang masyadong loss of taste and smell. Anong implications po nito clinically? Well, on the upper side, on the positive side, maybe more patients will consult earlier kasi more persistent yung cough, muscle fatigue. And with all this, information that we have, the possibly COVID po yan, they really do consult earlier. And sometimes sa mga journals, nakikita po natin, they have the milder symptomatology. So yung clinical presentation nila are mild to moderate. But as what Raul mentioned, there are some signals there that sometimes they are associated with more severe disease, pero the signal is not yet that robust. No? So if we're going to go by, did it affect, let's say, treatment? Remember these variants as what was mentioned by Dr. Eva, ang naapektuhan niya protein. And that means if you have new protein, pag ikaw yung virus, when you get introduced into the human body, of course, the human body is trying to act in a different way in response to that virus. So, ang sabi nga po nila, more transmittable, no? Mas infectious ang new variant. So that may mean that let's say you have a higher viral load sa katawan natin. That would mean again higher viral load means higher inflammatory response. And definitely that would mean down the line pag higher inflammatory response, potentially speaking, we are talking about a more chaotic, disorderly inflammation occurring in the body. You have heard as far as about the cytokine storm is concerned. So I would say that our treatment, since most of our treatment are concentrated doon po sa effect ng virus, yes, there are still some studies to tell us that using, let's say, steroid like dexamethasone is still effective in terms of, reducing the time that that patient may be on oxygen supplementation or ventilator, yung length of hospital stay niya is shortened. Yes, the possibility na magkakaroon po ng coagulation disorder, thrombosis, itong mga patient na to is still there. But one of our standard of care is really having heparin on board earlier on, especially among those who are oxygen requiring. So hindi po magbabago yon. Ano ang potentialing matatamaan po nito? Well, I'm looking at it that maybe our convalescent plasma transfusion may be less effective considering the mechanisms that was invoked by Dr. Eva, that these variants, since we are looking at convalescent plasma among those who recovered, so it's just rational to think if you're going to transfuse this convalescent plasma, para siyang passive immunization, no? Binibigay natin sa mga patient, if they have that variant, then there's a big question mark if they will react in the same manner as compared to, let's say, those patients who are not harboring the variant. Madalas po kasi nagbibigay kami ng convalescent plasma because signals are there that they may be associated with lesser hospital stay, more time to recovery if you capture them within the 7 days of illness. So yun po ang aming golden period if we are going to give the patient convalescent plasma transfusion. So for this particular, pag may new variant, questionable yung convalescent plasma because of the pathogenetic mechanism that I've alluded to. It was also mentioned that yung monoclonal antibodies, these are beginning to, get some good grasp in there in terms of their study, that they may harbor some promise as far as against this COVID-19. But then again, the studies right now are not that strong to compel us to automatically use monoclonal antibodies. So they are still being deemed as really experimental, and maybe patient selection will really play a major role on which way this studies goes as far as monoclonal antibodies are concerned. Yung mga binibigay nating antiviral agent, of course, there's remdesivir, favipiravir. This, especially remdesivir, the new journal which was just, the new study which was just published, I think yesterday, sa American Journal of Internal Medicine, really looks promising for remdesivir in terms of, in fact, may mortality benefit na siya, shortening hospital stay, and of course, shortening the time that that patient will need oxygenation. So we still don't know how will our antiviral work as far as this new strain is concerned. But definitely, among patients who gets admitted, part na po yun ng standard of care namin. Once they get oxygenation, once they need oxygenation, automatic, meron na po dyan dexamethasone, heparinization, and the possibility of giving, let's say, remdesivir, especially if the patient does not have hepatic dysfunction. The possibility of giving your patient tocilizumab is still there. It's an anti-IL-6 agent because it's a good has good action against the cytokine storm on top of your steroids. So automatic yun pa rin po binibigay namin. Having said that, what Eva mentioned, yes, there may be implications. We still don't know how the variants reacting. So nandun parati kini-question sa study, will our vaccine need booster doses? Or as what she mentioned, dapat ba annual to katulad ng vaccine? We still don't know. But I'm really one in boosting or at least really making robust their message ni Dr. Eva tsaka ni Raul, that really if we just go back to the basic, remember, the longer the virus is allowed to propagate, the more mutations it will develop. Ergo, if we don't allow it to propagate, then the mutations will not develop. So we always go back dun sa basic. Proper hygiene, hand washing, wearing of face mask, not being in crowded places, so we prevent transmission. Dr. Eva mentioned as well, if we keep the cases down, as what she mentioned, based on the epidemiologic curve, if we keep the cases down, then maybe we can take care of subsequent strains or mutations or variants from being developed. Right now po sa Philippine General Hospital at least, we are seeing that the cases are going down. Ang bothersome lang po talaga sa akin, although we see less patients in the ICU right now, which is good news. Bothersome sa akin is that majority of our patients who gets admitted are the ones who are elderly, may mga comorbids, young pero may comorbids, are the ones who were exposed in the community. So meron po kaming mga elderly patients, hindi umaalis ng bahay, magwa 1 year na silang hindi alis ng bahay, biglang dadalawin, let's say, ng someone dahil nga na-miss nila yung grandparent or yung parent, then suddenly this elderly individual, will develop the symptom, and lo and behold, COVID siya pag nagpa-test siya. So yun po yung mga bothersome sa akin, because it seems like we are really beginning to control the cases. They are going down, but at the end of the day, it's just unfortunate that we see cases who were previously well, tapos dahil lang sa isang dalaw or dahil lang, let's say, yung kasambahay umalis, may binili, then bumalik ulit dun sa bahay, hindi na ho nakalimutan na ata po ang minimum health standard. Kawawa yung patient. Siya ngayon yung nasa ospital because siya yung may comorbid tsaka elderly. So hopefully, I'm really one with their message that we still conform and we still comply with the minimum health standards and maybe prevent these mutations from being developed in the first place. Thank you very much again, and it's my honor to always be part of this panel.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jubert Benedicto, the head of the Philippine General Hospital Critical Care Unit Management Action Team. And it's always great to listen to Jubert because, as you can see, he's not reading any notes. He's just telling you what he's seeing at the Philippine General Hospital. And I think for those who are the practitioners who are watching us, he had some very powerful points about treatment, which I'm sure Chancellor mentioned will pick up on later. So thank you so much, Jubert. Very, very clear, also very clear presentation and very practical advice for everyone. So I'd like to call everyone back now into the panel so that we can start our panel discussion. And so we're gonna have Vice President Cynthia, Bautista. Let's have Director Eva Dela Paz of the NIH, Dr. Raul Destura of the Philippine Genome Center and the NIH, and Dr. Jubert Benedicto of the Philippine General Hospital. So before we start the panel discussion, I think Raymond is going to give you, our panelists, an idea of who's in the audience. So Raymond, go ahead and tell us who is watching us right now.
So nearly half of our attendees are viewing from NCR, followed by those from Northern and Southern Luzon and Central Luzon po. We have 27 attendees who indicated that they are located outside of the Philippines, watching us internationally. For the line of work, most of our attendees, at least for this webinar, are from the nursing profession, followed by those from the medicine profession po. For those who are dun po na-ilump po ba, kumbaga sa others, we'll make sure to break it down so that you'll be able to select your particular profession in subsequent webinars. For question number 3, 4, and 5, it looks like 88%, 93%, and 76% of our attendees answered all of the above po. So I think this will be a good starting point po for our panel discussion, Dr. Susie.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Raymond. So I think in a bit, we'll go back to those questions and ask our panelists to answer them. And then later, I think the team has selected 2 individuals who will be able to ask the question live to our panelists. But before we do that, I wanted to ask our panelists, all right? And I think you were all trying to say, if this virus does not replicate, we don't give it a chance to replicate, then the possibility that it will mutate will also decrease. So can you give us a comment on vaccination and how important? I think Raul alluded to this a little bit more, but let's articulate it better, because we still have some people who are thinking that, wag nang magpabakuna, mahawa na lang tayo, di ba? May mga ganon, I don't want to repeat falsehoods, but I want to get a sense from you, from our speakers, how important vaccination is going to be in the face of all these variants. So we'll start with Eva.
Thank you, Ma'am Susie. Kung iisipin po natin, the more people who get vaccinated, the better it will be, because even if they get the virus, di ba sabi nga po pagka yung mga ibang vaccines nila 1% in preventing serious disease, no? May mga ganun po ang sinasabi ng results from the vaccine trials. So very important po na malaking porsyento ng ating population get vaccinated dahil iwasan yung serious disease. And number 2, to achieve what Dr. Raul Destura mentioned earlier, yun pong herd immunity. So tingin ko po isa pong responsibilidad ng bawat mamamayan ng Pilipinas na sila ay magpabakuna. Kasi po kung mahal natin ang ating sarili at mahal natin ang ating mga kasambahay, ang ating pamilya, ang ating mga kaibigan, ay magpapabakuna po tayo.
Very, very well said, Doc Eva. No? I mean, the overarching reason why we need to do this, kung bakit kailangan natin magpabakuna, is so that we can take care of our loved ones, no? Yung mga mahal natin sa buhay. Raul, you already talked about this, but I want to give you another chance to articulate how important it is.
Yeah, the vaccination is the most effective means of controlling any form of epidemics or pandemics. No? It's been proven over time, no, that vaccination alone, depending on the degree of coverage, has the capacity to reduce the transmission. And in some cases, we actually had one win, no, remove the entire virus in the planet like the smallpox. So these are very effective mechanisms for which we control our population in terms of the transmission of any emerging viruses. Now, zeroing in on the coronavirus, it behaves with similar other RNA viruses that it really mutates over time. And right now, the knowledge on how it's going to be later is still a subject on continuous genomic surveillance on a global scale. Now, zeroing in on these particular mutations, for example, there is a bit of a concern with the 484K mutations because certain vaccines, for example, like the ones from Novavax and Janssen and Janssen, has a reduced efficacy rate of about 60% based on their in vitro studies. But if you think about it, it's the same efficacy rate of the influenza vaccine. So which means despite its reduction, it would still be effective enough to control significant transmission over time. The other thing that is important with vaccination is sometimes it may not completely protect, but it will modify the manifestations of your disease from a potentially severe one to a mild one that you can just rest up and sinigang on the side, which can help you hydrate yourself and get some rest. And modifying the ultimate presentations of disease can actually be done as well by these vaccines. Third is because of enhanced genomic surveillance, we are in a situation that's way better than ever before in terms of understanding the behavior of these particular mutations over time, which means that companies who has the ability to rapidly design, readjust, recalibrate the targets of their vaccines can just be, for example, in this case, development of a booster shots to further enhance coverage on specific mutations in those particular vaccine targets. So it's a little bit irrational to say, oh, let's just get infected and so that we increase our herd immunity, because the problem there is, what about the vulnerable population around you that may not be able to sustain the impact of the clinical manifestations of the moderate to severe form of disease, which can cause significant mortalities, as we are observing in even developed countries right now. So which means that it's more logical to increase our immunity as a population through vaccine rather than facilitating transmission. I think that will be irrational and ethical in fact, and it's actually a moral obligation by everyone, every member of the community to be vaccinated. And while we're waiting for it, it cannot be overemphasized the importance of the minimum health standard that is being advocated by our agencies. So that's my take on the vaccine.
Thank you very much, Raul. Jubert, your take on the vaccine, but I found it very interesting that you said those who get the variant don't lose their sense of taste or smell, no? And for many people, that's the thing that drives them to get tested. Kasi, parang never have they ever experienced not being able to taste or smell. But on the other hand, you're saying their symptoms, although they're mild, tend to be more persistent. But anyway, Jubert, what is your take on the vaccination, on the importance of vaccination in the face of all these variants?
Yeah, thank you very much again for this opportunity. So I leave the molecular argument to Raul and Dr. Eva. So ang madalas po kasi na-encounter namin, especially, with the offer of this vaccine. Remember, may prioritization po yung government natin. Frontliners muna una, and then yung elderlies with comorbidities. Ang madalas kasing argument na nadidinig ko po kasi is, will this vaccine, any vaccine, prevent me, allow me not to wear anymore the mask or face shield? The answer there is no. Even if you get vaccinated, kailangan pa yon. Tapos may tanong pang sunod, if I get vaccinated, will it prevent me, if I get it, from transmitting the virus to the other persons? The answer there is no, because right now wala naman pong 100% na vaccine na ganon. Will it allow me now to go around, if I get vaccinated, go over na sa parents ko, hug them already and everything? The answer there is no, because we still don't know. Pero ang quite consistent po na answer across all vaccines is that napakaganda ng efficacy niya in terms of you getting the severe form of the disease. And remember, it is only the severe and critical which is associated with mortality. So, ergo, kung gusto mo pang mabuhay, ayaw mong matay, then you get vaccinated, because regardless of the brand, it consistent po yung studies that it can prevent you from getting the severe manifestation of the disease. And that, I think, is a good gamble kung susugal ka na rin, because it will allow you to live a fuller life, possibly. And then it will trickle down the line, what Raul and Dr. Eva mentioned, as far as herd immunity is concerned and everything. Ang take ko po kasi ngayon sa vaccine is, of course, we still don't know a lot of things. But what we know right now as far as vaccine is really sending us strong signals for us to get vaccinated, especially kung wala ka namang contraindication. Raul mentioned, maganda yan syempre kung yung sabi niya nga, yung fast, the rate that we should get vaccinated, if we can do it at a pace which is acceptable, then definitely yun po a plus points for us. There's always that issue of access, availability. Yes, those are real issues. But if everything is equal, andyan po yung vaccine, then definitely parang as of now, parang no-brainer na magpabakuna ka. Yun lang po, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Jubert. No, I mean, the thing is, I think we have to outwit this virus, and we have the tools to do it. We have surveillance to do that, and now we have vaccines that can protect more people. So kailangan talagang uutakan natin, salbahe talaga itong virus na to. And just looking at that, I love that colored chart that you showed, Eva, showing the orange, the red, the new colors of the spread of dominant viruses that are kind of that are different, right? We have to put a stop to this, no? So I think this is a very clear message from our panelists. Raymond, we wanted to go back to the questions that we asked earlier, and we're going to ask. I'll turn it over to you to get our panelists to answer the questions. Go ahead, Raymond.
Thank you, Dr. Susie. I'll start with question number 3. It states, a COVID variant of concern is a mutation affecting the spike protein, it is more contagious, it is more virulent, or all of the above. Maybe Executive Director Eva can reiterate from her presentation just for this particular item po.
Raymond, I did not get the question, sorry, that the
Yes,
volume.
Opo. I'll read it again, Ma'am Eva. The question po states, a COVID variant of concern is option A, mutation affecting the spike protein. Option B, more contagious, option C, more virulent, option D, all of the above po?
First po, siguro ang pinaka-importante is defining a variant which is different from a mutation, no? A variant po is a group of coronaviruses that share the same inherited set of distinctive or signature mutations. So, ang mga mutation po just refers to type pwede siyang single typo letters in a set of letters, no, yung sa RNA nucleotide basis po nung SARS-CoV-2 virus. So hindi po siya equivalent. So yung mga UK variant, yung pong Brazil variant, yung South Africa variant, they have a set of mutations that set them apart from the other strains that are circulating in different parts of the globe. So ang sagot po dun sa katanungan ay all of the above, I think. Tama ba?
Okay po. Thank you, Ma'am Eva. Thank you po. For question number 4, a COVID variant of concern could option A affect testing accuracy, option B affect effectiveness of vaccine, option C affect effectiveness of treatment, and option D all of the above. So perhaps we'll ask Deputy Executive Director Raul Destura of PGC or Dr. Jubert to chime in.
Should I go first?
Go ahead, sir.
Okay, so for the first question in terms of, I think the first option is on diagnostics, right? Yeah. So as I mentioned a while ago, the current RT-PCR designs that are actually available in the country are multi-gene targets. No? If the RT-PCR tests that you are using are not just testing the spike protein target, but also the other gene targets, it would still be able to pick up the variant. Unless in the future, wag naman sana, no, that the other gene targets are also affected in terms of mutations in the future. So in terms of treatment, that was the second choice, right? Treatment, yeah. In terms of treatment, the standard.
Sir Raul, it's the option 2 is effectiveness of the vaccine. Does it affect effectiveness of the vaccine?
Yeah, the studies have shown that the vaccines are still effective for all of these variants. But in terms of this South African strain, there is a reduced effectivity that harbors the A484K mutations. But overall, if you look at the vaccine efficacy, it's still high enough to be effective on a programmatic level. And which means if you think about it, the answer would still be yes. And the third one is on treatment. Am I right? Yeah. So
yes, that is correct, sir.
Short memory span. In terms of treatment, the standards for therapy in terms of COVID has no difference in terms you are treating the variant or the non-variant of concern mutations. And the degree of response, however, may be different because, as mentioned by Dr. Jubert Benedicto, because of its enhanced receptor compatibility in the spike protein, there's a tendency for the virus to attach more, which means you will have higher viral burden, which means higher inflammatory responses, which means the need for more aggressive intervention may be needed, no, in that case. But ultimately, we really need a good drug that can effectively treat this patient in the outpatient, but it doesn't happen still at the moment. And hopefully we get those good antivirals that can actually be given as an outpatient regimen, because most of the treatment are very dichotomous. You want to control them, but they need to be treated inside the hospital. But in terms of programmatic control, it would be nice if it is something that you can take like a pill in the outpatients, further reducing the virological burden. We are not there yet in terms of treatment. But in terms of how to treat them in the hospital, there are standard therapeutic regimens that has evolved over time as new data on how we approach this treatment, as we go along. Was that the last choice?
Tsaka all of the above.
At saka all of the above. Yeah, I think it's all of the above. Yeah.
Thank you po. Thank you po, Sir Raul. And then finally, our last question. A COVID variant of concern can be option A, detected through study of DNA. Option B, detected through symptoms of the patient. Option C, detected through epidemiologic studies on locality. And then last na naman pong option, all of the above.
Okay.
First po kasi 'di ba sinabi po natin that the SARS-CoV-2 it's an RNA. So it's detection of an RNA. And sana po tumango si Dr. Jubert, pero ang sagot po doon sa pangalawa, hindi po nakikita ang variant of concern through clinical symptoms. Tama po, Dr. Jubert? At number 3, yung huli, Dr. Raymond?
Ma'am, detected through epidemiologic studies on the locality.
Yes, that probably is the best answer. Thank you. Unless may sasabihin po si Dr. Raul at si Dr. Jubert.
Yeah, just to add on to Dr. Eva's comment, so I agree it's not a DNA virus. For the second question is, it will only give us a clue in terms of out of the ordinary, getting more severe cases than before. That can be one clue. But again, it will be picked up by choice number 3, which is the epidemiological studies. And in this type of, medyo mayabang na tayo ng konti, pag sinabi na nating epidemiological studies, that includes clinical and genomic epidemiology in terms of monitoring this virus as part of the biosurveillance program. So the answer would be the comprehensive epidemiological study on choice number 3.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you, Raymond, we go to our 2 members of the audience who are going to ask questions. I mean, VP Cynthia is here. VP Cinch, you are seeing the fruit of your investments and support for the Philippine Genome Center. What do you think will be further needed to enable this group to expand and to do more?
Okay, I guess first thing is we need more. We need to support our researchers in the Philippine Genome Center. I guess we need more items for them, and that's what we've been asking the DBM for, because they're mostly contractual. So we want continuity in the Philippine Genome Center, and that's one. Of course, we still need resources, even as we have a lot of support from DOST and from other agencies. We need a lot more resources. So again, strategically, well, the Philippine Genome Center is more than just working on COVID. It's working in other areas as well. But I think for this particular situation, we need to fully support it as the Philippine Genome Center, and not just because it's a UP unit.
Right. So this is, I mean, the Philippine Genome Center is really a national institution. No? And I think, again, I'll just say it again, no? That the response to COVID is not just taking care of patients or even vaccinating. We have to know who the enemy is, where it is, paano siya nagbabago, tsaka kung anong balang aandar sa kanya. So malaking bahagi yun ng public health. No? Kaya sabi ko maganda talaga yung, I'm really very proud of all the work that you've done. And I know the audience is sharing that, they're saying it in the chat box, that this is very important scientific work that's being done in the Philippines that we should all be very, very proud of. Raymond, I'm going to turn over to you to introduce our audience participants.
Okay, so first things first, we'll get someone very, very close to Dr. Susie's heart. He is currently working with the Philippine Red Cross. Maybe we can call on Dr. Art Catley to give his ask his question po. Sige, Sir Art, go ahead.
Hi, Dr. Susie. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Doc Raymond, Dr. Cynthia, and all the panelists, congratulations. You're really doing a very big service to the country. Congratulations to TVUP. You know, I'm sure everybody knows that the Philippine Red Cross is in the thicket of testing and response dito. And with in the advent of these new variants, and in a few days time or a few weeks time, the country is contemplating on opening up slowly. So for the Philippine Red Cross, it gives us a sense of pause. Ika nga, the question is, with these variants, is there a threshold number of cases? Or what are our considerations, or what are the circumstances for us to even conclude that there is already a community transmission of the new COVID variants? Kasi the last time I heard na there is no sufficient evidence to say that there's already community transmission despite of the different reports of the cases with the new variant. So what are our considerations for even considering that there is already community transmission with these new variants in the context of us considering na mag-open up tayo slowly? So we are a little apprehensive there. Thank you. Back to you, ma'am. Back to you, Doc.
Sasagutin ko na si Seth.
Go ahead, Eva. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Ma'am Eva.
Maraming salamat po, sir, sa inyo pong katanungan. As many of you will know, a community transmission is when there is no clear source of origin of the infection already in a new community. So that means we can no longer identify who became infected after being exposed to someone who interacted with people from other infected communities. However, sa ngayon po, ang amin pong mensahe, kasama po ng Department of Health at kasama po ang Technical Working Group of sa variants, na-mention po namin to kanina sa media presser, there's no strong evidence yet that there is ongoing community transmission. We need to prove that large number of cases in different clusters and with no known linkage para po for us to say that there is community transmission, which means we will need better representation from all regions and populations. Please remember po, I mentioned kanina, nag-start lang po tayo ng ating genomic surveillance po first week of January at may yung data po na sinabi kong 1,222 sequences that have been generated, that was first week of January to the second week of February. And now we're doing another set for sequencing. Sinabi ko rin po kanina na we will also focus on areas where there is a surge of cases, like Region 7, no? Meron po tayong special focus doon. So sa ngayon po, ang amin pong binibigay na mensahe ay hindi pa po tayo nakaka-establish ng community transmission.
Okay, thank you very much, Eva. Raymond, we have another question.
Yes, and our second query comes from all the way from Bicol University po. Joseph Martin Paet, who is from the Research and Development Division of Bicol University. Sir Joseph? Okay, I think he got disconnected. So we'll probably march forward, Dr. Susie.
Okay, so Raymond, if you have an upvoted question, we can take one more question and then we'll have to start wrapping up. Go ahead.
Okay, the first upvoted question has already been answered. The second one was asked by Dr. Art. So the third one, I'll just choose the one from Mary Catherine, and she asks the panel, what could be the possible reasons for the mutations happening to the COVID-19 virus? Just to reiterate to everyone.
Okay, anyone can answer.
Okay, I can answer the question.
Go ahead.
The mutations for RNA viruses, it actually happens when the virus is actually replicating. And during the process of replications, there are some mistakes in the copying of the viruses. And when the mistakes are happening, sometimes it doesn't create the global effect of the virus, but at certain time during the mutational process, it might be able to shift into something that is significant. Like what we are seeing now is significance, meaning a change in the functionality, a change in how it's actually transmit in terms of attachment site, or a change that will make it more invasive into the cells. No, so this happens during the virus is actually replicating. So and that's one characteristics of RNA viruses that are a bit scary in the process, but they really mutate thousands of times each time. No, hindi lang significant yung mutation to have an overall effect to the virus, but in certain situations like what you're observing now, it can happen still in the future for as long as the virus are continuously transmitting in the community.
So importante talaga yung maitigil natin yung yung transmission niya. Kasi habang nagre-reproduce siya, lalo siyang pabago-bago. I think this is what we're trying to say. No? Okay, so we are now going into an evaluation of our webinar for today, Raymond. So we want to launch our evaluation questions.
Okay, thank you so much. So for those who are, again, joining us for the very first time, we often have this panel discussion assessment just to be able to assess, well, how much you have learned from this webinar through our panelists. It's a 5-question assessment. Number 1, the panelists demonstrated thorough knowledge of the topic. Question 2, the panelists were well prepared and organized. Number 3, the panelists spoke clearly and audibly. Number 4, the panelists used appropriate language with technical medical jargons adequately explained. And number 5, the panelists contributed to new perspectives and knowledge on managing various key COVID-19 health issues. So please key in. I am seeing only 41% of those who are in attendance na mag-vote. So please key in your answers. Over to you, Dr. Susie.
Okay, so we're going to give all of our panelists a few moments to just give their parting words, a few words to summarize or have take-home messages for our audience. We're going to start with VP Cynthia Bautista, who played a very big role in setting up the Philippine Genome Center. Go ahead. Nawala ba si VP Cinch?
Nakamute.
Okay, please unmute Ma'am Cinch.
I think she may be having internet connection.
Okay, we'll go to Eva. Go ahead.
The more the virus circulates, the more opportunity it has to change and acquire new mutations. So pag mas marami po tayong mga kaso ng COVID-19 sa bansa, mas marami po oportunidad upang magkaroon ng mutation ang virus. Bagamat may mga mutations na walang epekto, meron din po maaring makapagbigay ng mga katangian sa virus na mas malakas itong makapanghawa. So ang bidang solusyon po dito ay patuloy po nating pababain ang mga kaso sa pamamagitan ng pagsunod sa minimum public health measures na pinapatupad po ng Department of Health at ng gobyerno. Ito po, it's a matter of personal responsibility. So kailangan po talaga tayong magtulong-tulong lahat po tayo para po labanan ang pandemyang ito. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you very much. Raul.
Yeah, para sa pandemyang ito, na very important na kailangan talaga natin isali ang siyensa sa paggagawa ng mga desisyon para sa ating bayan. At ang Philippine Genome Center ay isa sa gustong tumulong para sa pagkontrol ng COVID virus problem natin dito sa Pilipinas. And rest assured that the research team will always try our best to give our best foot forward in providing scientific information that are needed for control of the virus in the country. Salamat po.
Thank you, Raul. Jubert.
Yes, good afternoon once more. February 19 na pala ngayon. So I'm 11 months already in the front lines. So gusto ko po talaga makita yung day na hindi na kailangan ng isang consultant na nagra-round sa ICU on an everyday basis. So hopefully, as what was mentioned, this virus is trying to outwit us at every turn. So let science speak. I think that's the best way to move forward. We need really multi-layered approach as far as the fight against this virus is concerned. So as of now, really there's optimism there compared po nung nag-start tayo dito sa pandemic. So we really just have to continue of what we do best with what we have, with what we know. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well said, Jubert. Maraming salamat. I don't know if VP Cynthia is back.
I'm back. Okay. Sorry
Yes.
about that. But
Yes.
basically, I just want to correct. I'm not the one who started the PGC. Actually, I knew of its conception in the very early part, but the ones who actually struggled to put it together, it's a whole history. And I think Chancellor Menchit is going to end is part of that history. But basically, the university is committed to supporting the Philippine Genome Center and also committed to making the Philippine Genome Center. I mean, even if UP is its host. But the second one is I'm very happy. Thank you to all of the organizers. Thank you to TVUP. Thank you to all of you here, because this is public education. You know, the problem with vaccination, I think we have to say this more often, that you have to have vaccination, because there are a lot of all sorts of stories coming up, and even a lot of things coming up in the Viber group. And I think our role, and we should have more of us, is actually educating the public. And we're very grateful to those who are with us. But beyond us, the public is much bigger, diba? The public that you want to have herd immunity for is a bigger public beyond this group. So even working at that level of mass communication is important. But thank you to all of you for doing this.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. As Vice President Cynthia Bautista, Vice President for Academic Affairs of the University of the Philippines. And so we are now going to have our synthesis by none other than Chancellor of UP Manila, Menchit Padilla. Menchit, please go ahead.
Magandang hapon po sa inyong lahat. Okay. Well, we started our webinar today with the Vice President for Academic Affairs, Dr. Cynthia Bautista, she actually has the office where the Philippine Genome Center is housed. So, of course, we thank her for the continuing support that she has given to PGC. She gave a brief history of the Philippine Genome Center, and she said that in 2011, the UP Board of Regents approved the establishment of the Philippine Genome Center in response to a scenario when the borders are going to be closed in the event of a pandemic. And that pandemic is what we're having right now. So the PGC is a UP System Research and Advanced Research Center for Genomics and Bioinformatics, with the mission of increasing the capacity of the Philippines. So it's really for increasing the capacity inside, making sure that we're able to train the people and the young ones who will take care of the future. So with initial grants from the UST, PGC received also grants from CHED, the Philippine California Research Institute initiative. And it was that grant that actually expanded the core sequencing facility. And we're all actually using that core facility right now for COVID. Now, in the past 10 years, PGC has provided a solid track record to prepare for this pandemic. And now PGC joins NIH, RITM, and DOH in the biosurveillance of COVID in our country. Now, PGC being the biggest sequencing facility in the country was actually the first to flag the UK variant. PGC also actually is a COVID laboratory since April 2020. And I think, one thing that maybe many people do not know is that PGC, together with the National Institute of Molecular Biology and Biotechnology, or NIMBB of UP Diliman, the NIH of PGC Visayas and PGC Mindanao, they actually conduct hands-on training for those hospitals who want to set up the COVID laboratory. So actually PGC is not only in Luzon, but now in Visayas and Mindanao, and they have actually have taken the major role of training the hospitals who want to set it up. Vice President Bautista said that this COVID pandemic reaffirms the role of UP as a research and public service university. And indeed, PGC has brought the faculty, even within UP, in different fields together. But I think what is important to tell our audience now is that although UP is hosting PGC, it has shared its resources with students and researchers from many universities from all over the country. Our main presenter is Dr. Eva Cutiongco Dela Paz, who is the Executive Director of the National Institutes of Health of UP Manila, and likewise the Program Director for the Program on Health in the Philippine Genome Center. She actually started her talk by saying that information must be accurate. And to avoid confusion, we have to make sure that there are substantial studies on the things that we actually tell the public. She actually gave it was to bring down the level of discussion to delay. Thank you, Dr. Eva. I will just give the highlights of her talk. I encourage everybody to go back to the recording at the YouTube. So let me give you the highlights of her presentation. She said that genomic sequencing actually allowed the development of diagnostics and treatment modalities for COVID. Indeed, genomics and bioinformatics are now very important tools, and very fortunate that we have that now in the Philippines through the Philippine Genome Center. She shared with the group that the PGC actually processes 750 samples a week. The PGC has been designated by DOH to actually take charge of the biosurveillance in the country. She moved on. Why track? And I think, this is something that we must remember. She said that every new patient who contracts the disease is an opportunity to change or mutate. And every time they enter a new patient, the body of the new patient, the virus gets better. And that's why it gets tougher for the doctors taking care of them. She moves on by saying that there are many mutations, but most mutations are not useful. And there are combinations of mutations with clinical impact. But what is important now is that we understand what are the mutations that are here in the Philippines, and then which ones will have clinical impact within our setting. It was interesting when she showed the map, just to show the different mutations. And I want you, when you go back to the recording, I want you to take a look at the map with all of the dots to show that different countries have different mutations. And this is actually what we are monitoring in the process of surveillance. She also gave us an example on what happens. You may have a beginning dot with a different color. I think that's the simplest way she actually presented it. When they change colors, they may have a different mutation. And it's really when this is spread, that's really the one that's affecting the whole world right now, not even the Philippines. So I want you to go back to that graph, that picture with the dots, and look at the phylogenetic tree, because that's something that we should remember when we're trying to understand COVID. She talked about the different variants. I'm not going to talk about that, but just to highlight one point that came out during the question, when she said that when you talk about a variant, it is a group of coronavirus that share the same inherited set of distinctive signature mutations. Pag mutation, it's just one or two letters, they're different. And we did have another session, I think early in January, just talking about the difference between mutations and variants. And I urge the community, the audience now to go back to that session, because it will help you understand when you hear the word variant and you hear the word mutation. The key messages of Dr. Eva. A national genomic surveillance using the whole genome sequencing can investigate the outbreak dynamics and assist in the design of diagnostic assays, drugs, and vaccines. So in other words, this was not discussed, but allow me to say this. Because of genomics now, we were able to get the sequencing of the COVID virus, and that was actually shared to the rest of the world. And that is the reason why different companies now started working on their diagnostic kits, and they also started working on the vaccines. It is the era of genomics that made a difference. So number two, she said that the whole genome sequencing is also used for monitoring changes in efficacy of treatment. So in other words, hindi na pwedeng sabihin mo gamot mo treatment A, treatment B. We've got to look at the genomics part now because they can actually affect also the way we're handling the patients. Number three, she said that mutations or combination of mutations leading to new variants may provide the virus with selective advantage. Sinabi niya, matatalino ang virus. Basta lumipat sa ibang katawan, pwede siyang magpalit at mas magaling siya. Can be more transmissible, and have a difficulty, has on the ability to evade the host immune response. And the last thing she said that, we need a better understanding of the variants of concern for our country. We try to understand the rest of the world, but what is important is that we understand what's happening in our country. She had because we have the Philippine Genome Center now and we have a better understanding, she said that, I think we can be better prepared for the next pandemic. And that's what we're doing now. We're not only trying to resolve COVID, we're actually trying to make sure, we're doing our best to make sure that when there's another pandemic that happens, we know what to do. And again, she said at the very end, keep the numbers down so that by using the public health measures, because by this way, the COVID virus can be contained, and then, then it will the total picture of, controlling the COVID pandemic. Keywords that she left: prevent, detect, isolate, treat, and reintegrate. We had two reactors, and the first reactor is Dr. Raul Destura, who is actually the director of the National Training Center for Biosafety and Biosecurity. And maybe just to inform the group that this particular center, we didn't mention it, but I wanted to let you know that Dr. Destura leads a team who takes care of partly training all the people running the laboratories in the country, because you have to understand the issues of biosecurity even before you set up a lab. And they have trained actually thousands at this point. So here are the messages of Dr. Destura. Again, he highlighted the importance of biosurveillance. And that is, when you talk about biosurveillance for COVID, it is the movement of the virus. And it's really, I'm glad that he mentioned that we do contribute to the international data bank now, because the virus moves around the world. And if you do not give our data, then when there is a vaccine or treatment that will be discovered, then we will not be included in the formula. So it's very important that science is deep in the Philippines so that we can make a contribution to the general picture of COVID. The second message he gave is that there really is a need for a day-to-day observation to even say that the variant is affecting clinical outcome. So, when we hear the news and it's based on something that happened last week or last month, we don't even know whether that's already true right now, because Dr. Destura said this is a day-to-day activity that's happening among the scientists as well as the clinicians. The third message he gave us on the issue of diagnostic kits. He said that because there was a question about, now that we have the variant, are the diagnostic tests still working? He said, on the diagnostic kits, Dr. Destura said, the kits that have multiple gene targets have better chances than those with a single gene target. So just to let you know that, if you go and read the kits, it will tell you which gene targets they're attacking. It's just saying that if they're targeting more than one, then you're better off. The fourth one is on preventing mutations. I think this is reinforcing again what Dr. Eva said. The only way is, if you want to stop the prevention of the virus, we have to stop preventing the virus to going to another person by doing the minimum health standards, and that will actually is a major factor for the control of COVID. The fifth message really was he was saying that he talked about herd immunity, but let me just mention this part where he said that our main goal right now really is how fast, how efficient can we have this vaccine, in what short a time can we cover a big number of people so that we can achieve the herd immunity that we're talking about. So it's no longer it's not a magpapabakuna ka pero ako hindi, because right now COVID is global and the effort has to be simultaneous. He said that this has to be a collaborative effort, and he ends again by saying that the vaccine may be the best, but what we have right now really will be to do the minimum health standards, because that's equally good in spreading the disease in the country. Our next reactor is Dr. Jubert, our pulmonologist. And of course, he talked about treatment. And I think, we have many in the audience wanting to understand whether is it the same signs and symptoms. And it's interesting. This is the first time I'm hearing this, Dr. Jubert. He said that what they've noticed is that for those with the variant, they have the symptoms would include the persistent cough, the tiredness, the increased muscle fatigue, and but there was no loss of taste and smell. And he said, somehow this is good because since there's persistent cough, then they actually go to the doctor much earlier. And I like that part, Dr. Jubert, that because they have the persistent cough now, that the diagnosis is made much, much faster. To the question, did it affect treatment? Well, Dr. Jubert said we're doing exactly the same thing. He had a detailed discussion of the treatment that they're offering. And as a matter of fact, he actually gave some information about new data that has come out. But I do want to just mention one point when he said, because there's a question about the convalescent plasma, and he said that it may be less effective right now because of the mechanisms of the mutation, but maybe it's just too early to know because all of this is being studied right now. The monoclonal antibodies may have some promise, but as he said, if you notice, everybody's saying we've got to study this even before before making conclusions about the effectivity of one. So he ends again by saying that, minimum standards stay, proper hygiene, the mask, the distancing. And he said, if you want to keep the cases down, we have to take care of the variants too. And then sharing the information about PGH, I think, is also important because he said the cases are going down. But what he is seeing now is that the elderly and those with comorbids who never left the house. But it's because there was a visitor who came to the house. And I think it's a very good message for the community that it doesn't mean that just because you miss a person, you're going to visit because you may be breathing the virus. Now, during the open forum, I had to add this, although it was not part of their talk, it was asked by Dr. Susie on their take about the vaccination. And so let me just mention a few things that they highlighted. From Dr. Eva, she said, a big proportion needs to be vaccinated to achieve the herd immunity. It is our responsibility. Okay, from Dr. Raul, he said that over time, vaccination is the best mechanism to abort the pandemic. It will not completely protect. It can modify to a milder version. We are better off now because of genomic surveillance. The vaccine companies, if we are watching, the vaccine companies are also watching these studies because they can actually adjust and modify the vaccine so that it becomes a better one for COVID. And this is the statement of Raul. It is a moral obligation of the members of the community to actually get the vaccine, So he said, overall, the vaccines will work with the variants. Huwag na po tayong matakot, no? Sinabi ni Dr. Destura, it will work. From Dr. Jubert, on the issue of vaccine, he warned us, even if you get the vaccine, yes, you still need to wear the mask. You still need to do the distancing. Can I still transmit? Yes, because it's not 100% protective. He said, what is clear is that regardless of the brand, there is a purpose for the vaccine. Huwag na po tayo matakot. Okay? On the final words of our presenter and speakers, well, once again, Dr. Eva said, the more the virus circulates, the more opportunities for mutations. From Dr. Raul, include the science in the solution. And the PGC, since Dr. Eva and Dr. Raul are part of, and of course, Vice President Cisher are all part of the PGC, PGC is willing to help the country. From Dr. Jubert, the approach has to be multi-layered. The approach to the fight is multi-layered. It cannot just be one approach. He said, use science for the solution. And I'm glad that he used the word optimism, Dr. Jubert. He said, there is optimism. We just have to do the best, he said, with what we have right now. And finally from Vice President Bautista, and she said, UP is committed to make sure that the Philippine Genome Center performs its role in the big picture in the country. In addition to what science is doing, I think, one of the big roles of UP now, because TVUP is also part of UP, is to make sure that public education becomes a major part of what we will do for the next couple of months. So let me give my final thank you. Having been part of the Genome Center, this time I'd like to say thank you to UP. Thank you to UP for establishing the Philippine Genome Center. The country is now a major beneficiary of this initiative. Indeed, there are more challenges ahead, but without the support of the management of UP, we will not be here to serve the country. Maraming salamat po sa inyo lahat. Back to you, Doc Susie and Raymond.
Thank you very much. That's Chancellor Menchik Padilla. Always gives us a great synthesis and summary. And so we're coming to a close soon. I'd like to thank all of you, our audience. If it was not for you, we wouldn't be here. And just looking at your comments in the chat box, nakakataba ng puso, no? I think for all our speakers, for the Philippine Genome Center, we're all in this together, and I think we had a very fruitful and productive session today. But next week, very interesting. I remember someone said last time, why are you talking about safety of the vaccines without an allergologist? Okay, so next week, we're going to have a session that is co-hosted by the Philippine Society of Allergy, Asthma, and Immunology. And many of you know that they had a statement that has circulated, and we're going to have an in-depth discussion. The title of our session next week is May Mga Allergy Ako, COVID-19 Vaccine Safe Ba? Okay? So, naalala ko, ang daming mga tanong tungkol sa mga allergy. So, invite your friends. If you're teaching, invite your classes to come. You're in the hospital. Some of you are writing. Invite your office mates. It's worth it to sit down an hour and a half, 2 hours, and understand what this looks like from the perspective of the immunologists, allergologists, and the specialists in asthma. So that's next Friday, and we're going to have a little bit of a different format. We have invited multi-awarded and very popular journalist Karen Davila to be part of the Reactor. She's not going to moderate the webinar. She's going to be a reactor. And of course, I'd like to thank all of you who participated in asking questions. So maraming salamat po sa inyo lahat. Raymond, over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Susie, and thank you for that beautiful synthesis and summary of the events for this webinar. Maraming salamat po, Chancellor Menchik. Makita-kita po tayo ulit next week, and this really is the one wherein we will be talking about allergies. And for those, especially for those who have been asking, pwede po ba ako matusukan kung meron po akong asthma, meron po akong psoriasis, meron po akong skin allergy, all of those things. We hope you'll be able to still join us for next week's webinar. But for this webinar, this formally closes our webinar for the week. And we look forward to your company next Friday, February 26, same time, same channel, 12 noon. It's a date.
Together, let's stop COVID deaths.
So keep safe, keep healthy, and see you online.
The enemy remains unseen. I'll keep your hand in mine. Let's say a prayer one more time. I know you long for home, but I am here, you're not alone. I'll stay with you until the coast is clear. The others faint before my fears, the others laugh before my tears, but right behind the mask, I look into myself and ask, do I have strength to carry on? My God, how long must this go on? I need you here to keep me strong. I'm here to hold the line. I'll keep my word. until my time is look into my eyes and say his name to realize it's fine to be afraid. Just hold on to the word he gave. This time will come to pass, 'cause this salvation's made to last. He'll carry you to see the break of day. The others pain before my fears, the others laughs before my tears. But right behind the mask, I look into myself and ask, do I have strength to carry on? But God, how long must this go on? I need you here to keep me strong. I'm here to hold the line. I'll keep my word until my time. The others bang before my fears, the others laughs before my tears. But right behind the mask, I look into myself and ask, do I have strength to carry on? But God, how long must this go on? I need you here to keep me strong. I'll keep my word, your word is mine. The others pain before my fears, pushing on despite the tears. Please take us through another day. Just hold my hand, and I will hold the line. I will